The year 2016 is a year the world will not forget in a hurry. For Nigeria, many of its citizens may find it difficult perhaps to point to any particular high. At the turn of the year 2015, it was quite clear 2016 was going to be tough for Africa's largest economy. And so it proved. Oil prices kept hitting new lows, and with it, the fortunes of a nation and the hope of over 170 million people. Energy. Every country's future depends on it. No wonder then that President Muhammadu Buhari's first trip in 2016 was to the United Arab Emirates for the World Future Energy Summit. On the 28th of January, the president had his sights on Kenya for a 3-day official visit where he held talks with President Uhuru Kenyatta.
It will happen to Africa. It is Africans themselves who will win the freedom and the prosperity that they deserve.
Instead of diversity being seen as a strength and a beauty, some see it as a threat and a reason to kill and destroy. A forum such as TICAD, where we come together to find common solutions as partners, recognizing our common humanity, is therefore very important.
Our goal is to end extreme poverty and to boost shared prosperity for the bottom 40%. We have no chance of achieving that goal unless Africa grows and prospers at a rate that maybe even we can't imagine. We think it can happen with leaders like President Kenyatta. We know it can happen. Get in on the deal now. The earlier you get in, the better it will be for you.
In February, the president was off to France, where he addressed the plenary session of the EU for the first time. Between February 20th and March 15th, the president and his team were in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Malabo, Equatorial Guinea. In March, the president got another chance to meet President Barack Obama at the 4th Nuclear Summit. The underlying objective of that summit was to develop a united strategy to prevent nuclear bombs or dirty bombs getting into the hands of terrorists. It is a subject matter President Buhari can relate to. The Buhari administration, like other governments in Africa, has an eastward-looking policy. China provides a new alternative, plenty of cash for cash-strapped countries. The president and his team were soon off to Beijing for a 5-day visit. It was a trip that was heavily criticized, but the administration was keen to point out the benefits of the trip.
We have to look at it holistically, and I think that when we look at our foreign policy gains, we have to look at it also from the lens of the objective of Mr. President. And, essentially, coming into office identifies 3 areas, and, security, governance, and the economy. Now, with regards to the economy, it's really about building blocks. You're not going to be able, in one fell swoop, sort out your economic situation. You want sustainability with your economy. And so it's about building blocks. And with those, in that area of the economy, diversification was an area that he said we have to focus on, which makes a lot of sense, And, but when you diversify, you're also looking to increase your options, increase your partners, increase, the areas that you're going to make competitive.
World leaders have been open to receiving Nigeria's president, who they perceive as a man untainted by corruption. The anti-corruption summit in London was therefore a good ground to once again lay his government's plan and efforts to clean up Nigeria to the world. But that summit made the headlines for all the wrong reasons after this moment to forget by the then Prime Minister David Cameron.
A very successful cabinet meeting this morning. We were talking about our anti-corruption summit. We've got the Nigerians. We've actually got some leaders of some fantastically corrupt countries coming to Britain. Nigeria and Afghanistan, possibly the 2 most corrupt countries.
Buhari's response to that did not disappoint those who admire his straight-talking style.
I'm not going to demand any apology from anybody. What I am demanding is the return of assets.
A common thread that ran through all the president's foreign trips in 2016 is the war on terror and what has been done to aid over 2 million internet displaced persons. His first speech at the opening of the Japan-Africa Summit, or TICAD-6, was focused on this. President Muhammadu Buhari had already met President Barack Obama twice before August 2016, a signal of the diplomatic détente between both countries.
Obama and the United States for backing Nigeria to consolidate its gains on democratic system. The visit of the Secretary of State when he visited Nigeria to see the president, the former president of Nigeria, see the chairman of Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Jega, and so the opposition was very clear and a positive trend that saw us through for this credible election we had.
But I want to emphasize how much I appreciate President Buhari's work so far. Looking forward to seeing him put together his team so that we can do everything that we can to help him succeed and help the people of Nigeria succeed. Because if they are successful in doing well, that will have a ripple effect not only in West Africa but throughout the world.
A few months after the administration passed the one-year mark, the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry was in Abuja to get a first-hand feel of progress made by its ally on security, counterterrorism, the economy, and human rights issues. Engagements on the foreign scene don't get any bigger than the United Nations. The United Nations General Assembly presented President Muhammadu Buhari a unique opportunity to address world leaders all under one roof. His trip to the UN came at a time when Boko Haram had been put on the defensive by the Nigerian military, working with the multinational joint task force. When at the General Assembly, the President and his team were involved in several defining side events. The highlight here was his address to world leaders.
We'll hear an address by His Excellency Muhammadu Buhari, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
Legal or otherwise, that will have a negative and a disruptive impact on the international community's collective efforts to fight terrorism. We should not be distracted in our collective resolve to beat back terrorism in all its forms. As we confront terror, we must also commit to stopping the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, which nurture its spread. To this end, Nigeria urges member states that are yet to sign and ratify the Arms Trade Treaty to do so without further delay. Nigeria has made remarkable progress in our resolve to defeat Boko Haram, whose capacity to launch orchestrated attacks as a formed group has been severely degraded. In the last few months, their operations have been limited to sporadic use of improvised explosive devices against soft targets. Nigeria has continued to combat terrorism based on the established rules of engagement and in conformity with international best practices. I take this opportunity to reaffirm Nigeria's commitment to human rights norms and international humanitarian law in our efforts to counter terrorism and violent extremism.
He later joined dozens of countries in signing the Paris Climate Change Deal. Yet again, he met President Barack Obama.
Restrict Boko Haram, a brutal organization affiliated with ISIL that has killed an enormous number of people and decimated communities there. Because of President Buhari's leadership, he has been able to refocus the Nigerian military. We are coordinating carefully, and we discussed here today additional ways that we can make further progress, not only in destroying this branch of ISIL, but also to make sure that the people in this region are able to recover from the devastation of Boko Haram's occupation.
And when we came back, our major problem we identified and we mentioned during our campaign is about security, economy, and corruption. And in each of the three identified objectives, the United States help us, training our military, helping with hardware and software. That's why we are very successful in the Northeast, where Boko Haram was holding clearly 14 out of 774 local government, and they declared a caliphate. Now they are not holding a single one, and they are reduced to what we call using improvised explosive devices and attacking soft targets. And then the training teams we received from the United States and the hardware and software help has helped to stabilize it. And in the south, the militants there we are being helped again with intelligence and advice and training, and we believe things will be okay. Diversifying the economy, we made the mistake of being a mono economy. Until now, we found out putting the bills on food importation would be difficult. So we went into agriculture. We are very grateful for the advice we have been receiving.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs, who was pivotal to the success of the UN engagement, was keen to point out to the media that the visit was successful.
You saw the Minister of Environment, how she organized the side event on what we're doing in the area of environment. You know, it was very well organized. It wasn't just, you know, people reading statements, but it was, you know, interactive and a nice mix of people. It was well attended.
Then in October, Nigeria turned its attention towards Germany, Europe's largest economy. Germany's Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier was in Abuja to prepare the way for President Buhari's visit to Germany. He told his foreign affairs counterpart his country will continue to help Nigeria in its quest to totally rid itself of Boko Haram's menace. Germany will also assist with rehabilitating over 2 million people displaced by the insurgency.
Dealing with the IDPs, perhaps returning them in their regions after the deliberation from the siege of Boko Haram, and on the other side also humanitarian assistance needs access to the region. So
few days later, Nigeria's #1 diplomat was on his way to Germany, where he met with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. German Chancellor Merkel made a commitment towards contributing to the €50 million pledge to recharge the Lake Chad Basin and provide assistance to the internally displaced persons in the northeast.
Merkel said more specifically was that the funds that has been made available by the European Union, that they would take from that for the Lake Chad Basin. Mr. President had spoken about the drying up of the Lake Chad and our need for support, you know, in the recharging of Lake Chad. That Lake Chad is now 10% of what it was due to climate change and so forth, and the amount of money that is needed to make it viable. And this could also actually stop a number of migrants from, you know, embarking on that hazardous journey.
The meeting between these two was also dominated by how to stem the tide of illegal migrants from Nigeria into Germany. Germany committed to providing vocational training for migrants to be deported back to Nigeria. This meeting will always be remembered not just for what was said, but perhaps for what shouldn't have been said. The president had just left Nigeria on the heels of the headlines being made by his wife's comments. She had voiced serious concerns about her husband's handling of his office, stopping short of saying he had lost grip. When the journalist asked him his reaction to her comments, his reaction was unforgettable.
I don't know which party my wife belongs to, but she belongs to my kitchen and my living room and the other room.
Flashback to May and the World Economic Forum for Africa was in focus. The theme at the 2016 forum was Launching Africa into the Fourth Industrial Revolution. From one speaker to another, the Fourth Industrial Revolution was the buzzword as delegates highlighted the need to adapt it to transform economies and improve the lives of citizens on the continent. Kigali, the capital of Rwanda, provides an idyllic setting. A country once torn at the very seams by genocide has risen to become a leading light in Africa. Over 1,000 global shapers who gathered for the 26th Annual World Economic Forum on Africa recognize this too.
The transformative power of information technology is at the core. But ICTs are not a magic bullet. There is a bigger context. Let me mention two elements to get us started. First, financial technology. Boutique investing is critically important, but Africa needs scale. That means building the deep and efficient capital markets that enable institutional investors, such as pension funds, to achieve stable, reliable returns by investing in African infrastructure and businesses. ICTs are making such markets platforms commercially viable for the first time. But we need to be thinking even bigger because Africa needs access to that capital in order to grow.
Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari did not attend the summit, but instead he sent his Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Onyama. He stood side by side with co-chair of the summit, Tony Elumelu, who puts the forum into perspective.
A platform for articulation of ideas, policies that can help humanity and help bring economic development to people. And for Africa in particular, and at a time like this, it's even more important because the oil price and the commodity prices has affected our economy. And this kind of gathering helps all of us to put heads together and see what we can do in strong ways to help our economy improve. Two is it's a meeting point for private global capital. The people who attend this event, they control trillions of investable dollars. And Africa needs massive investment to come in. And we need also to tell the world the new and the real narrative about Africa.
Growth projections for Africa vary depending on who you ask. But grow it will. If African economies are then to become economic models for development, then something has to give. What is it?
Public-private partnership to start with. And the government, from our perspective, what we really need to be doing is providing the enabling environment. We've seen, with people like with Tony, Dangote, and all the others, that Africa has the business people, we have the entrepreneurs, we have the innovators. And what is really key here, and an event like this really strives to do, is to showcase that, to show the rest of the world that we really have, what it takes to build the confidence in Africa and to provide the enabling environment. So that's really what it is. And as Tony said, we want to diversify in Nigeria. Africa for too long has depended on raw materials and such commodities. But we also have wealth creating talent in Africa. And it's about innovation, and that's what we want to do.
The forum came at a time that economies around the world were reeling from depressed commodity prices that have ignited turbulence in world stock markets, put pressure on currencies, leading to dimmed growth prospects. But there was hope for growth. But what will drive this growth? The answer, it seems, lies in digitization of Africa's economies, governance, and public-private partnerships.
Corruption is a very interesting but also intricate topic, just because it doesn't only come from the public sector. Corruption can take various shapes or forms. And we have to remember that Africa is a very big continent, and so we have over 50 different stories and different pictures. So often one of the issues we're facing as Africans is a bad perception, a misperception that it's difficult to do business in this continent because of issues like governance. However, we're seeing countries progress, changing the enabling environment and becoming more and more attractive to the private sector and to investment all across the continent through reforms. And we sincerely believe as the World Economic Forum that a platform like ours is needed to really enable that conversation between the public and the private sector.
While the forum lasted, experts dissected the challenges that have held back Africa for so long. They also brought ideas to the table that will help Africa make the quantum leap into the fourth industrial revolution.
It is a myth that economic and social development can ever occur without civic participation and rights. It is also a myth that there is only one acceptable way to build a just, free, and equitable society. Finally, let me conclude by stressing that our hopes and ambitions for the future must be built on a foundation of clear-headed realism.
It can be said relations with African countries and neighbors were the focus of Nigeria's president as the year wound to a close. King Mohammed VI of Morocco was in Abuja in November for the first time. This meeting suggested the diplomatic spat between both countries was now a distant memory. The Moroccan monarch came to Abuja with a rather large business delegation, a signal of the importance perhaps he attached to his trip. The two countries signed about 15 bilateral agreements in the realms of trade, agriculture, and a host of other areas. The standout deal was the deal to build a regional gas pipeline costing billions of dollars.
The pipeline will be designed with the participation of all stakeholders with the objective of 1. Accelerating electrification projects across the region, thereby serving as a backbone for the creation of a competitive regional electricity market with the potential to be connected to the European energy market.
The year 2016 has a great number of optics which have defined it. Successful elections in Niger, Cape Verde, Ghana, and Gambia signaled a new democratic dawn in Africa where the defeated candidate conceded defeat and a transition process began. West Africa was a shining example to the rest of the continent. No one saw Yahya Jammeh, who also conceded defeat to Adama Barrow, rescinding weeks later. With memories of the Liberian Civil War still fresh in the minds of Liberia's President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who is also ECOWAS's chairperson of the Authority of ECOWAS Heads of State and Government, she, together with Nigeria's President and Ghana's John Mahama, headed to Banjul to convince Mr. Jammeh to begin a transition process. They failed to achieve that. Cueing this 50th Ordinary Summit of the West African Heads of State and Government, which was supposed to be a celebratory one, but instead it had a huge dark cloud hanging over it. Mr. Sirleaf tells West African leaders a solution must be found as the January transition date in Gambia draws near.
It is now important that the authority at this summit considers recommended measures to bring the matter to successful conclusion before January 19.
President Muhammadu Buhari in his address will rather focus on ECOWAS's move towards full economic integration. He says he's encouraged by efforts made so far, but also recognizes these efforts have been hampered by globalization. He's recommending diversification of West African economies as the way out.
This agri situation demands that we diversify our respective economies from commodities into other sectors, such as banking, construction, and telecommunications, and most importantly, agro-processing, manufacturing, and services.
Gambia may be the smallest country in the West African group in ECOWAS, but developments here represent a big challenge which ECOWAS must resolve. As the year draws to a steady close, ECOWAS member states will be keeping a keen eye on developments there. It won't be too far-fetched to suggest West African leaders might just be making one more trip to Banjul as they seek a way out of the impasse there. For Nigeria, however, 2017 holds so much promise. Many will be watching closely to see what sort of relationship it will have with the United States under a new president. From the Federal Capital, Shegun Ojumu, STV News.